and an experienced public company board director who has delivered growth and transformation for luxury and mass retailers for over 20 years. Denise has a proven track record of exceeding revenue and profit targets, positioning businesses as market-leading performers, and achieving award-winning results. Currently, Denise is the Senior Vice President of Merchandising for Walmart's Women's Group and online brands. Prior to this, Denise has had noteworthy roles, including the CEO of Aerosoles, the President of Global Digital for the Ralph Lauren Corporation, and EVP and CMO of Saks Fifth Avenue. Denise, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Robin.
So, since this is the sort of first introduction for a lot of our audience members, we thought we'd just start at the beginning. So can you tell us, let's go all the way back. Did you always know that you loved fashion and know that you wanted to get into this industry?
So I think I have a fairly unusual background in that I started out as a finance major undergrad. I was in investment banking, if you can imagine, for a few years. Then I got my MBA at a very finance-heavy business school. And then I went into management consulting for about 7 years because I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And I figured I would kick the can and not make a decision by going to McKinsey for a while. And then after being at McKinsey, I ended up finding my passion by working with retailers and, in particular fashion retailers, where I consulted with Saks for many years for both fashion and transformation. So that's kind of how I meandered my way there. Because I have that background, I have an unusual skill base, I would say, for a fashion executive. I tend to be just as passionate about product and aesthetics and the creative part as I am about the numbers and the analytics, which is, sometimes trips people up. But that's my background. Oh, Robin, you're on mute.
What a properly Zoom thing to have happen. I'll just a note, I'm doing this Zoom call from home, so I'm muting myself in case either of the children decides that this would be a good cameo time. So I'll try really hard to make sure I'm always unmuting myself when I talk. But here we are. So while I've got an interlude, we've just been joined by a significant amount of people. So housekeeping note, everyone, we're going to keep you on mute during the talk. If you would send questions to Rachel Woody-Pumford, she's the one with the logo in the background, and we'll filter them into my questions list so that you can be interactive with the conversation. So Denise, you have been in the industry for a while. How have you seen it change over your 20 years in the business?
Yeah. So, as I will date myself and share that I joined the fashion industry in 1999. And at that time, e-commerce, the digital space for fashion, for luxury, because I joined Saks to start Saks.com, frankly, and build that business from scratch, from an idea, because I was consulting with McKinsey with them. And they asked us to help craft an e-commerce strategy, and I was the lead consultant on that. And they asked me to come on board 3 months into it and make the concept happen. So I would say, probably the greatest transformation in terms of, accelerated change have been over the last 20 years, given technology and digital. And so I got very lucky that I always say I feel so lucky to come to work every day and do what I do, to be part of the industry during that acceleration of change. So I joined the fashion industry to change and transform it because I wanted to start Saks.com, which at that point, people, like literally my friends, laughed at me because the only thing that was selling online were electronics and books. And nobody thought, as I said, fashion would sell online. So it started with digital, which was non-existent when I first joined. And this included both e-commerce, and then ultimately I became the chief marketing officer there. And so digital performance marketing has also been a huge part of the transformation, which, has become increasingly more important. And then from there came the advent of your digitally native vertical brands like Bonobos, which reports into me now, and Eloquy, and your, otherwise known as direct-to-consumer brands. And with that, the importance of sustainability, transparency, social purpose, reimagining business models like a Warby Parker or Bonobos, where there is no inventory in the store and it's just a guide shop and you buy something and it gets sent to you afterwards. So this whole kind of throwing business models up in the air and seeing what is the best answer for the consumer, really being focused on the consumer, has been a big factor. The importance of social media and influencers, of course, has been a huge factor in this space and continues to be a huge factor. Frankly, Revolve is what it is today because of influencers. And then the millennial consumer shift away from traditional fashion retailers like department stores, think Neiman Marcus and Saks and Macy's and Kohl's, an accelerated shift to online shopping and Amazon and startups, which of course has only been exacerbated by COVID. So those are some of the big shifts. And I see Deanna Baker, my partner from Walmart. So I just want to welcome her to the group. Hi, Deanna. So those are the big shifts. I would say, just summarize, digital, of course, the DNVBs, social media, sustainability, transparency, the millennial shift away from traditional fashion retailers, the overstoring of retail, and now, of course, the contraction of that, have some pretty substantial shifts in 20 years.
It seems to me like you would have to be a very nimble thinker to keep up with that kind of rapid shifting. I mean, the things that you just listed over the course of 20 years, that's as big an industry shift as fashion could have.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really interesting to sort of to have come in at that pivotal moment when fashion was going online. And I'm sure your friends who were skeptical have eaten their hat by now. I think we've proven that fashion can properly be sold online. So I think that's, can I just ask, do you think that your background as a consultant or having that sort of consultant mindset really helps you with that ability to sort of step out and think objectively from the outside about, we are here, we're going here?
Yeah, I think that I do think that my training at McKinsey and even being in business school and always focusing on the macro events, I always felt like I could see the macro environment shifting sometimes faster than my colleagues at work. So when everyone was not believing in the internet or the e-commerce for fashion, it seemed so obvious to me because it was so convenient. And then there were some other, everything I've done since then has been focused on transformation. So whether it was transforming Saks Fifth Avenue and building its digital capabilities, or going to Ralph Lauren and transforming their digital capabilities, or coming to Walmart and establishing, to begin with, the focus was Walmart.com as a fashion destination. Everything has been focused on transformation and understanding the macro and how we want to position ourselves to win within that. And I do think that consulting background helped me objectively see it, coming at it from a kind of outside perspective, looking at it from an outside perspective versus inside. So yes.
So speaking of transformation, you had a long career at Saks prior to your move to Walmart. What was that transition like for you, moving from a luxury retailer to a mass retail environment?
Yeah. Look, I worked in luxury for 12 years. And then I went to Ralph Lauren. If you call that luxury, I don't know. It depends. In the end, we sold mostly at Kohl's and Macy's. So I didn't think it was luxury, but we like to position ourselves as luxury because the marketing is all about the luxury. And so the opportunity to broaden my experience within the fashion industry beyond a Ralph Lauren and a Saks Fifth Avenue, and to work in a new part of the industry and bring a different taste level to accessible price product seemed really exciting to me. It seemed clear, I would say 3 years ago when I first took this job, that it was going to come down to two companies, Amazon and Walmart. And for me, I always want to be in the middle of the action versus reading about the action in WWD. So for me, I have a mentor who has had a huge impact on my career. He was the CEO of Saks Fifth Avenue, and I continue to, speak to him every few months. And I remember bringing him this opportunity, as I had a few at the time, and he was like, "Are you crazy? There's only one option. You have to go to Walmart, because that's where the action is at. And you can either continue to read about the Amazon Walmart fight in the papers, or you can go in there and, have an impact." And so that's why I joined Walmart and went into these different price points, because the opportunity to affect more people really felt, and be part of this shift in the landscape, felt like an opportunity of a lifetime.
So as transformations go, the whole world has hit quite an accelerant, I think, in a lot of ways, in the last 6 months. So how have you seen COVID impact the fashion industry specifically? And as that sort of objective outsider that you can be, how do you think businesses need to pivot to transform and work with this new environment we have?
Yeah, and I think, Robin, a lot of this is yet to unfold. But what I would say are, some of the clear things that were happening prior to COVID that have been accelerated by COVID is, clearly COVID has accelerated online shopping, probably 5 years within, 10 months, or whatever many months it's been since March. With, more than 70% of shoppers saying that they're going to do substantially more shopping online. I think it's like 73%. So there we can say, if the overall fashion online penetration was, I don't know, 20%, it's less, of course, for the lower price points and higher for the luxury space. The penetration is always different depending on the average unit retail. But, you could envision us going from 20% as an average to 40%. We're already there now, but the question is what happens when COVID unwraps. But I think a lot of people have dramatically shifted their behavior, consumers. I would say the second big thing is the brick and mortar right sizing. We've been talking about being overstored for a decade. Certainly this has put a highlight and a spotlight on those retailers that either had too much debt or were too extended in brick and mortar. And so retailers are permanently closing those stores now to adapt to the new retail landscape. And, you see even retailers like a JCPenney being bought out, and, some of their stores being turned into fulfillment centers. So I think that acceleration is quite dramatic. The third is, which I find interesting, and again, many of these trends are already here, but have been accelerated by COVID, is the demand for better business practices. So COVID has really accelerated those trends to ethical business practices, with 73% of people planning to support brands who contributed positively, either to people who are suffering from COVID, or sustainability, transparency, purpose. Like, there seems to be a accelerated demand for that. And then the operational innovation, which, it's like change or die, right? That's the motto for retail, change or die. And so look at JCPenney and Sears and all these big retailers who, because they didn't change their business models, aren't able to survive. And so retailers have to continue to rethink about their current processes to drive faster growth in the new normal. And that could be anything from a digital value chain, assortment, supply chain, operating models, all of that. And then the last one I would say, that comes to mind for me, is working from home, which I think is super interesting, because I think some of the meetings that we've had with our brand partners where they've said, normally it would take me a day to get to Bentonville to have this meeting, and then we'd stay in a hotel and it was an hour meeting and we'd have take a day to get back. Now we can do the whole thing in an hour, and where we already have a strong relationship, it feels just as effective. And so I do think that there is a component of that that's here to stay. So those are just some of the things that come to mind.
Do you mind if I dig in a little? I have a personal question kind of about supply chain and whether uh, are you seeing adaptations in the supply chain to the sort of disruption that occurred back in March? And I ask that because specifically we were involved in making masks because there was a giant mask shortage, right? So March comes around, COVID starts, and PPE was very difficult to get. So as a nonprofit, we started doing some micro batch mask making in-house, and through that process learned a little bit about what had happened with supply chains. And so I wonder if we're seeing, was that one big hiccup and we don't, and maybe we're past it, or do you think that industry will change accordingly or to it around that?
Well, there's so many different things that are changing with supply chain from, where the Trump administration, started talking about tariffs for China, and then people started shifting their manufacturing where they could outside of China. And then, of course, and by the way, I got this completely wrong. So when March hit, I said to everyone, we're going to be swimming to work in inventory in September because there's going to be so much inventory out there, similar to when 9/11 happened in 2008 when we went into the recession. I thought we weren't going to be able to pivot fast enough, and there was going to be a tremendous amount of inventory out there, and everyone was going to be marking down like crazy. And I was flat out wrong, because the reality is that everyone had enough time to shut down their manufacturing in March, where actually we're now here in the fall and we don't have enough inventory, which is so back to your question about supply chain, I think we all feel the pressure to tighten the cycle of the manufacturing process from design through on the shelves, because in situations like this, it's hard to you're either shutting down too early or you're not able to catch it in time. So the masks, originally it was mostly Etsy who had the biggest business in masks because it was the cottage industry, and people at home were just building masks from fabric that they had. But big players like us and even the J. Crews and the Gaps, we weren't able to get on board until June, because it takes a while to get these things up and running. So I think there's a lot of opportunity in that this again has highlighted for supply chain.
What do you think the lasting impact will be on the designers and retailers and professionals throughout the industry?
Yeah, I think that there's so many questions, right? So I'm sure all of you are watching, watched New York Fashion Week, and which is, unrecognizable. And then there's London and Milan and Paris. And when I was, at Saks, that was what I did. I went to all three of those cities, or all four of those cities. And so the question of like the value of the shows, and it takes them, for the big designers, it's a lot of money to put on one of those shows, and what's the value, and do you do it a season ahead, or is it the same season? So all of that is like a big thing up here that is getting worked on. Certainly the focus on digital and how to showcase the product digitally is a big area as well. So I think those are probably, the biggest opportunities that still need to be explored. And frankly, the solutions are we probably don't yet know, but will be coming in, the next few years.
I'm, as an organization that also hosts a fashion week, we are nervous to see what the world decides. We even ourselves are asking, how do you even start to plan something like that? It takes 6 months to plan a fashion show. So when do we when will it be safe to even start planning again when we're talking about in-person events and things like that. So there is a lot to be there. There's a lot still hanging in the balance, right? We don't know what we don't know yet in terms of moving forward. So
Yeah, it feels like we're not going to be in crowds for at least another year. So then the questions, but what's interesting, of course, is like challenge spurs innovation. And so what does that mean for these fashion shows, and how do we pivot and take a new approach to showing the product, and of course, most likely via digital. So that's even watching the Emmys. I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to watch that, but that was kind of an interesting experience, and how people are pivoting in creating even content for television has been super intriguing. So everyone's in the same place.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch the industry from tiniest player to biggest player all sort of go through the same questions at the same time, and nobody really has a better leg up on it than anybody else, because it is such a huge shakeup. So
I will say, just to underscore that a little bit, only because I've been around for quite some time. When 2008 happened, the recession, that's where Gilt and Outlook and all these players, Rue La La, came into play, because there was all this additional inventory out there because the economy came crumbling down and people weren't spending. And so that was the startup of new business models. And I anticipate new business models to start up now, because anytime there's a crisis, there will always be new business models emerge from that crisis. So it'll be interesting to see that continue to play out.
I hadn't thought about that, the rise of Gilt in relationship, or like players like that in relationship to the recession. So yeah, it will absolutely be fascinating to see what people come up with. And I'm sure that things in 5 years, there'll be things that we can't even imagine that we never had, that we didn't have before, right? Things that we can't live without, that will come from this. So we are thinking that someday quarantine might lift. Maybe it's 2021, but we do think it may happen. As quarantine restrictions lift, are there any trends that you're excited to see as people go back into public space? Will people be dressing up more because we've been in pajamas for a year?
That is such an interesting question, and we debate it internally all the time. We're leaning into, of course, the comfy and cozy and the tie-dye and all active and athleisure and all the things that you would think that we would lean into. But personally, I am so tired of wearing comfy and cozy that if I do get to go over somebody's house and social distancing, I'm like basically wearing a ball gown. I'm so excited to get out of my house. So, and that's now. So I can't even imagine another 6 months. So I do think that when I talk to other people and when I see them, there will be a combination of the comfy and cozy, but I also think that there will be the people who are excited to start putting their jewelry and their dresses on. We may not be able to put those high heels back on because we've retrained our feet, but other than that, when I look at the runway shows, which I'm sure you've looked at as well, I see a lot of dressed up clothing, and usually we all follow the designers. So I'm confident that we will be back looking glamorous no time soon.
We will pull the blazers back out of the closet soon.
Yes.
If not
and
just
hopefully
for soon.
You'll buy a free assembly blazer. I'll tell you about that soon.
Exactly. So speaking of, Walmart has really changed its fashion game to become an even larger player in the retail space than it was, including more trendy pieces, bringing on brands like Scoop, alongside obviously everyday staples. Also, there's partnerships with online retailers like ThreadUp and with Walmart.com. What kind of collaborations should we be looking out for in the future? It seems like a very exciting time.
Yeah. So I would take the step back. We've pretty much overhauled, the shopping experience online over the course of the last 3 years with new elevated creative, bigger imagery, an editorial voice, user-generated content from influencers. We've added 1,000 national brands. We've added 5 new exclusive elevated brands. So Free Assembly, I don't know if any of you had the opportunity to read the press yesterday, but we launched yesterday. This is one of our outfits. So that was a lot of fun. We have EV1 Sophia Scoop Eloquent Elements, which we also launched in online and we'll be bringing to our US stores in the spring. And then most recently Free Assembly, which is a fashion essentials line. And then of course we acquired a number of fashion companies, Bonobos, ModCloth, Eloquent, Shoes, Bare Necessities, all of which contribute to our portfolio. So I give you that backdrop only in that, yes, strategic partnerships has been a part of our strategy as well. And, you know, we did a partnership with Lord & Taylor, and we're excited about all the brands that we were able to bring on board. And you know what happened to Lord & Taylor, so we parted ways there. We've done a partnership with Kidbox, which is a subscription business for kids, and Ascena. And then, of course, you know, testing out the new business model of re-commerce with ThreadUp, which we're really excited about because it plays back into sustainability, which we know is important to our customers, as well as brings brands to the site that we didn't otherwise have. For example, Louis Vuitton handbags and Gucci handbags are, you know, our best sellers. So, you know, we're constantly testing new business models and evolving. That kind of provides an overview, but that would be a good summary of that. I can't share anything with you, Robin, on what's happening going forward. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We'll all in due time, we'll find out. Speaking of reading, you wanting to be in it instead of reading about it, I was reading USA Today at the table with my husband this morning, and I said, "Oh, I'll be speaking with this woman later today." So I saw that piece in USA Today. Do you want to tell us a little bit about this new brand that's launched? From what I read, it seems very exciting and a little, correct me if I'm wrong, a sort of higher entry price point for the consumer. Is that true?
Yes, it was. So the focus is a fashion essentials brand. So the objective is to give Gap, Madewell, Uniqlo, you know, some competition. We felt that American style essentials, what used to be called basics, but now we've, you know, are calling fashion essentials, landscape was ripe for innovation and modernization, and hired a really fantastic team that have experience at Ralph Lauren, J. Crew, Everlane, many different places. In really talented team. We hired a design team for the first time at Walmart and have been working over the last year to build out this line. And the price points are $9 to $45 and includes everything from blazers for women to denim, and for men, rugby shirts to you know, to denim as well, to vests. It's a very it is a fantastic line of about 60 styles to start. We are saying that we're soft launching it now. I encourage you to check it out on Walmart.com or in our stores. We're in 250 doors, and excited to bring it in a much bigger way in the spring, to launch it in a much bigger way in the spring. So I would consider this kind of a preview collection.
So I read that in the article that you hired a design team for the first time, and I think that's really interesting. Since we have probably several designers on this call, because we do work with so many Arkansas-based designers, can you tell us just a little bit more about the decision behind that and what kind of what you're looking for from those designers in that process?
Yeah, we really wanted to lean into elevated and modern I would say thoughtful design and elevated and modern styles and silhouettes, with exceptional quality at incredible price points, and felt like um, bringing a design team with their unique point of view and creating a brand with a strong DNA would only come from hiring a special team of designers who believed in the mission of bringing these exceptional product at exceptional prices with a focus on sustainability, which we thought was just not out there in the market. And who else but Walmart could do something like that, given the scale that we have, and still offer, the denim we have. Think like Acne denim for $200 plus, but it's $27. And so it's really exceptional quality and styling. And that very much comes from our design team, who were completely passionate about the purpose and the mission to bring the style and quality that they were developing in their previous lives at Everlane and J. Crew and Gap and Ralph, to Walmart at accessible price points.
I think that's a really exciting development within the sort of Walmart family. So note for the audience, we are reaching the end of our preordained questions. So if you have questions for Denise, please drop them in the chat to Rachel Woody Pumford. We'll have about 15 minutes at the end for you to drop all of your burning questions in. So, so Denise, what advice do you have for people at different stages in the fashion industry? Creatives that are trying to figure out how to enter into it and what their near-term futures might look like.
Yeah, look, I think that for anyone, I always say network. And I'm always impressed when people call me out of undergrad and just kind of look me up because either I went to a school that they're going to, or they know someone who knows someone who went to a school that I went to. But I think that is the most important thing, is knowing that you don't know what you don't know, and trying to network with as many people. I would say, for me, the mentors I've had in my life over the course of my career have had a huge impact on my trajectory and, success. And without them, I can't imagine where I personally would be. So I think also, wherever you're working, seek out those people. For me, my mentors have always been my bosses. So almost every boss I've worked for, I still keep in contact with, even if it was from 30 years ago, on a quite regular basis. So I've gotten lucky that I've had some really great bosses. Because typically mentors are the most effective when they happen organically and people are vested in your career. And that happens when you just work to over deliver relative to expectations. That I would say is another thing that I would advise is, just constantly seek to understand what you're working to do and over deliver relative to that, and network, and try to pick, if you're working for companies, try to pick companies that you think are winners. And for me, that's also been a part of my strategy, which is why I jumped over to Walmart, because I thought Walmart was a winning company. So you're looking for great bosses and great companies.
So the number of questions coming in is pretty deep. So I'm going to go ahead and launch into those. I think it's exciting. We've got a lot of participatory audience members today. So I think that says something good about our speaker. First audience question: what would be your advice for emerging designers and their approach to connecting with buyers, at building the relationship with buyers?
Mm-hmm. Look, I think tenacity is great. And so getting your product in front of those buyers, I can't tell you how many times in my previous life, it particularly where designers who were from, very, very small lines were incredibly tenacious about getting in front of buyers, and we ended up buying big lines from them because we wanted to be first. And so I think it just comes from, reaching out and being tenacious and making sure that when you are pitching the buyers, that you are thinking about where they're coming from versus where you're coming from. And so organizing, whatever it is that you're presenting so that you're solving their problem. And, thinking about both price point and style and every aspect of it is coming through in your presentation. So I think those that are the best have a little bit of a lookbook, who, have set up what the DNA of their brand is, what they're trying to accomplish, understand their price points, understand how they're differentiated versus other brands, and are able to articulate all that.
As a personal add-on to that, how important is knowledge of production to a designer in that conversation? Like knowing how, having relationships already with manufacturers, or knowing at least about, minimum units that they can order.
Yeah,
and,
I think it's very important. I don't know how, it's like you don't have anything to show if you don't know about production. So and me in my chair would expect the designer to have thought that all through and to be working with the appropriate people to think that through. So I would say very important.
Good deal. Where would you recommend an emerging designer live to get their foot in the door and be noticed by the industry? And has that changed at all due to our new digital environment?
I don't know. That's a good question. I mean, historically, I would have said a New York or LA. I don't know the Arkansas market that well, so I'm probably not a good person to ask that question from an Arkansas point of view, only because I'm talking to you from the East Coast right now. And I don't know if things have changed with COVID, so still TBD there. So maybe, Robin, you can answer that question from an Arkansas point of view.
I think that when we talk about the future of fashion here, we definitely want to think that there will be alternatives to living in New York. There will be alternatives to living in Los Angeles. Whether we're living in that alternative already, I'm not sure. Yeah. But I think that we are doing everything in our power to try to make a case for the possibility of fashion coming from the heartland, right? Things can happen in between the coasts as well. Whether or not fashion's ready, we'll see. Lots of things are changing, right? It's a transformational time for everybody. So, yeah. So that's my non-answer to that. Do you see Walmart in the future forming and collaborating with independent designers to reach new standards in fashion for the mass?
Yes, 100%. We're negotiating with a big designer right now, and I hope that we'll be able to communicate that partnership over the coming months. And then we're in discussions with another designer that you will know. So absolutely, I think that it's all about talent and partnering with that talent and creating differentiated product that brings credibility to Walmart as a fashion destination, both in stores and online. And the way that we do that is by building out our internal teams as well as partnering with others. So 100%.
That's very exciting. Mm-hmm. and I know that news will drop out of nowhere is what I feel like that's how it'll happen. I'll read it in the paper one day and say, oh my gosh, okay, very exciting. Another audience question. I am a consultant for a niche supply chain and procurement firm. Our clients include several international brands. We often hear that supply chain feels like marketing forgets to inform them about promotions or changes in inventory and vice versa on what is being communicated to marketing or digital. Have you seen this? How are your teams improving on communication?
Let's see if I understand that question. So I definitely think communication is a challenge. We start with line plans. So before we build out the assortment, we have a line plan the designers, create into that line plan. And then we go and find our manufacturing partners and build out the line. I'm not sure what the marketing question is.
I'm rereading it. We often hear that supply chain feels like marketing forgets to tell them about promotions and changes to inventory. So basically the information gets to the audience before it gets to the supply chain on what the next thing is.
I don't know that marketing would be making those decisions at Walmart. It would be the merchants and, the business owners. Our marketing team, which does an amazing job, and I think has done an amazing job with our new free assembly launch, is really not about driving decisions, but about marketing the product to our customers. So really wouldn't have any interaction with supply chain.
I think that's a key point. Marketing's not driving the decisions. Marketing's coming far after all those decisions have been made.
Marketing takes the beautiful product that the business and the supply chain and the designers have created and then says, okay, how do we allow the customers to see this and engage with customers? And we leverage influencers from a credibility point of view or social media and all of that. So they're more about making sure that it's engagement. It's all customer engagement.
So we have a question about influencers. Walmart products, fashion and home, have been popping up on my Insta feed for a few months now. What has the response been from influencers? Has Walmart seen a benefit from this engagement? And do you anticipate building long-term influencer relationships?
Mm-hmm. So we work with an agency who, because we have so many different influencers and that's a business now, right? So we work with an agency who secures the influencers for us and we identify the strategy and the demographics and what we're trying to achieve. And then the agency goes out and executes with the influencers. I would say overall, influencer marketing has become a huge component of our marketing strategy. And it's a great way to borrow credibility from others. And I would say another component, back to your question about COVID, where we used to do these big photography shoots where there'd be 30 people on a set and there'd be models everywhere and photographers and videographers. Like, we're not able to do that now. What a surprise with COVID. So we're using our influencers as models, which you'll see a lot of retailers are. And so that's been a very interesting pivot and change, where on our website are our influencers as our models now and our editorial features as our models, where you wouldn't have seen that 7 months ago. And I think a lot of people are doing that. If I look at Revolve, it's similar. So influencers have become a huge part of the strategy, not just in terms of credibility and engagement with consumers, but also in bringing content onto either your site or your photography in your stores, which is interesting.
There was a lot of talk, I feel like in 2019 and early 2020 about the end of the age of the influencers. And I think that we can, with COVID, put an end to that rumor. I think that the influencer is here to stay for quite a while. Yeah. Because you make a great point about how else are we getting images of product on models at this point if we're not sending it to the model? We're not bringing people on set. I mean, you're right, not in the numbers that we were. So,
and if we do, everyone's looking like Rachel and Kate, and it's hard to be there. Like, you guys look beautiful, but like, it's hard to work in an environment with 20 people like that all day long. And then making sure when the models are finally ready that everyone's 10 feet behind. It's a very difficult situation.
we just did a shoot in-house because it was a mask shoot. So it was specifically for the product that we hopefully will be retailing soon for masks. So it was easy because everybody had to have masks on. But it's hard to do hair and makeup socially distanced. It's not an option. So is there anything in the works when it comes to online tailoring for clothes ordered? You'd think I'd feel comfortable shopping over the internet by now, especially as we move away from brick and mortars. But even the thought of returning items that don't fit upon arrival turns me off. Any innovations in this space that you can share? Maybe leveraging at-home designers who are expert at this.
So maybe there were two questions in there. One was on like, how do I get my stuff tailored? And then the other was, I'm not a fan of returning things. Are those the two things?
I think so.
As a digital person since literally 2000, I've like never understood, and with great respect, the return question, because no matter what, I get the stuff delivered to my house, and if it doesn't work out, I can put it in the mail, or I jump in the car and make the trip to the store, which I would have had to do if I bought it in the store anyway. So I've never been afraid of returns, because either I've thrown it in the mail, which is either easy, or I've gone back to the store to return it. And I would have had to go to the store anyway if I bought it the first time. So no matter what, I'm saving time. To me, online shopping is all about convenience. And when you shop some brands more frequently, you get to know their fit. Tailoring, I agree with you, it's a big pain in the butt. And I am 5'3", so I have to get everything tailored, like literally except for sweaters. And so I agree with you. It's a big pain in the butt. And for me, I've just found a tailor wherever I live and spend a lot of time there. Online tailoring, I don't know that we've solved yet, because no matter what, that feels like it's an in-person thing to do. Because if the person does their own, pinning, then if it's hemmed and the garment is ruined, it's a hard thing to do.
So we have time for probably 2 more questions. So last call for questions from the chat. When working with fabric suppliers, what are unique ways to unlock costing?
I mean, fabric. I don't know. Early lots buying scale of it. Those would be good decisions that my teams would make. And I can't answer that question other than, of course, scale and upfront, and using the fabric in as many different silhouettes as possible. That's what we typically do. So a fabric for a shirt, we'll reuse it in a dress, and we'll typically agree to use it 2 or 3 times in order to get the scale where we can get the right costing.
That question I also didn't quite understand. I wouldn't know how to answer that either. That one goes farther back on the supply chain than I'm familiar with. So we have one last question. Where should we watch for opportunities to learn about your upcoming collaborations with designers and new brands?
Just read the papers. It'll be in there, I promise. We've got a lot of fun stuff coming up, and we'll continue to push. We're excited about, continuing to evolve. Both are in store. So we've got mannequins for the first time ever. Let me see. Do you want to see a picture of Free Assembly?
Yes, please.
Okay, let's see if I can. So this is I don't want to lose it. So I'll just show you. Can you all see this?
Yeah, I can.
Okay, great. So this is the line. So you can see here,
Oh, that's
um,
exciting.
there's, there's with the blazer I was joking about earlier and saying you buy free assembly. This blazer is like our number one selling item already. But you can see it's men's and women, and super fun, great attitude. What I love, and then we have a new homepage. I'm trying to see if we can get into slideshow but I don't think I can. But we have a new homepage that talks to the sustainability. You can see 100% organic cotton. We're doing 360-degree turns. And I was going to show you the stores, but I don't see it in here because it's just not loading. So, but the point being there, and I'll wait to see if I can get it to load, that we have mannequins in our store for the first time in our Walmart history, which is really exciting. So in 3 stores of the 250, we're testing mannequins, and we're excited to see how that goes. So there's a lot of change happening, and we're working to elevate our in-store experience, continue to elevate our online experience, and then bring new brands and design talent into the mix.
That's an extremely exciting development, in my opinion. I've always thought that apparel has such a big footprint in the store. So to see that footprint shaken up and given some more interactivity or some more, I mean, mannequins, simple as that, is an exciting development. So I'm glad that you told us that. I hope to see them in our local store whenever we go back to the local store, which we'll see about that. Well, Denise, thank you so much. It's a very exciting time, I think, hearing about all the new developments. And as a person who lives in blazers, I'm excited that there'll be some options from at a price point that is sort of new development at Walmart. So I appreciate so much your time spent with us today. I know you're a very busy woman, so thank you so much. And I look forward to popping back in with you when we find out about the new big designer collaborations that are coming online.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And take care, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye. And